Hello, Thursday World Economic News. Start with this chart, which is the ISM PMI. It's a good indicator of how things are going. And you can see it's turned up again, and everyone's got dreadfully excited. You can see it on this chart, wonderful calculated risk. But Denninger at Market Ticker here states MSM cheers massive input cost ramp, and he's found fault with the ISM. Quoting from the ISM report, we get new orders and production continue to be strong, and employment rose above 60% for the first time since May 2004. All very good. Global demand is driving commodity prices higher, particularly for energy, metals and chemicals. That was from the report. Carl comes in with as he does, Global demand, what about profits? So he's looking at it from an investment angle, but it's not purely investment angle. Real people are involved here as well, as we'll see. Input prices recorded at 81.5%, up a full 9 points since last month. Growth, okay, but growth in what exactly, asks Carl. Input prices can only go two places. Final prices to consumers, that means you pay more, or they get eaten up by the manufacturer. They make less profits, lay more people off. Telegraph Co UK, record growth at factories comes with inflation worry. British manufacturing is growing at the fastest pace since records began, a leading index showed. But the pipeline of inflationary pressures are threatening to burst. Exactly the same thing. ISM comes in strong in, PMI comes in strong in the UK as well, but with commensurate inflation worries. Emma Rowley writes this article, activity at factories this month expanded at the fastest pace since the market SIPS Purchasing Managers Index began 19 years ago. That meant that the index's headline reading hit a surprisingly new high of 62, following December's upwardly revised 58.7. And all of these things, anything over 50 is growth. However, the cost of factories' purchases also accelerated at the fastest rate in the survey's history, with more than 3/5 of manufacturers reporting that input costs had risen. And obviously the same thing applies in the UK, as Denninger points out it does in the US. Business Insider Money Game gives us David Rosenberg, who's the perma bear from Gluskin Sheff, points out a couple of things on US GDP. I've picked out on the second one, where he writes, indeed, the key point here is that nominal GDP was up at a mere 3.5% annual rate. I mean, we're now used to thinking that 3.4 is good. But what is the normal rate for a sixth quarter of post-recession recovery historically? In other words, what normally would we expect to be at this stage of a recovery from a recession? And it's 7.3%. As a loyal reader pointed out to us, this comes in at $42 billion a month. That's the extra, that's the growth. When we are adding federal debt at a monthly rate of $125 billion. How long can this arithmetic of federal debt rising at triple the pace of nominal income growth remain stable is truly anyone's guess. In other words, the economy is being boosted by huge deficit spending, which is 3 times the amount of commensurate, again, GDP growth they're getting. The federal budget is going out of all proportion, and they're getting very little bang for the buck for the spending in GDP. FT Alphaville, John Kemp, there is no global output gap. Now, output gaps are an important economic concept. It's kind of your economy isn't doing its potential. It's analogy like a car. You've got a car, but the carburetor's blocked up, so it's really not firing on, it's not working properly. You can't get full zoom out of it. Or the mother-in-law's in the passenger seat or something. Something's holding it back. And he says there is no global output gap, and he's balanced the East and West to make it global. And it's an interesting read, so I'm going to read some interesting for you. Rapid increases in commodity prices tightening supply-demand balances and falling inventories tend to confirm that the global economy is nearing its maximum sustainable output, at least in the near term. That's stressing that he thinks there's no global output gap. In this context, it may not be possible to use fiscal and monetary policy, that's fiscal, which is government spending, and monetary, which is central bank looseness, to make advanced economies grow much faster and reduce unemployment without triggering big increases in the cost of food, oil, and other industrial raw materials. Only increases in productivity, reductions in real wages and incomes, weaker currencies, and a shift into higher value-adding businesses can solve the problem of mass underemployment. Ouch. We go on. Job losses structural. This is the painful reverse side of globalization. Emerging markets' increased integration into the world economy means more competition for resources and employment in the advanced economies, and reduced living standards for the households and firms which compete most directly with rivals in developing economies. Globalization is creating losers as well as winners. We all know this, but this is an article based on economic stuff. Yes. Structural shifts are not new. Britain's farmers in the 19th century suffered a massive decline in real incomes and living standards as the prairies opened up in the Americas. Its coal-producing, steel-making and cotton-spinning communities were devastated by the emergence of new competition from Europe and Asia during the 20th century. The point is, these shifts were structural, not due to a lack of demand. Attempting to reverse them by boosting government spending or cutting taxes and interest rates would not have resulted in long-term gains unless it was accompanied by competitive devaluations of the exchange rate and protectionist measures. Precisely the retreat into autarky, which intensified the Great Depression in the 30s. Autarky is kind of self-sufficiency sort of thing, withdrawing into your own country and trying to do everything yourself. Finishing with, I think this is finishing with yesterday's, but competitive devaluation is not feasible for larger economies such as the United States and the Eurozone, and it cannot be pursued at all by all countries at the same time, otherwise it will become mutually self-defeating. In a global economy with little or no spare capacity overall, particularly in the natural resource sector, a strategy of monetary expansion and competitive devaluation will simply result in accelerating inflation. Obviously the link's there, and it's worth filling in the gaps that I've left out. Business Insider Money Game gives us why Nicolas Sarkozy is more than happy to turn the economic reins over to Angela Merkel. And it's basically because he wants France to be more efficient. He's tried to get them to be more efficient, but every time he pushes them, they push back harder than he pushed forward, and he really doesn't get much done. So this chart shows unit labour costs going from 0,1 to now, the last 10 years, and you can see that France is becoming increasingly uncompetitive, and there's nothing he can do about it. They just won't let him, so he's hoping that Angela Merkel will take over Europe and make everybody efficient. That's the idea. Right, we'll finish with Money Game Business Insider again, the 11 countries at risk of becoming the next Egypt. I'd normally flick through this very quickly, but they've actually put a lot of effort into putting this together. This isn't just thrown together, and if you go to via the link to the website, you can follow the links for all the information. For each one, I'm just going to pick out one pertinent bit of information, but they've got investments to watch, style of government, inflation, unemployment, social media, and conclusion. And it's all very professionally put together. It's not thrown together at all like a lot of the Business Insider stuff is. So we start with Morocco, and I've pulled out the principal thing, which is unemployment among graduates, and that's what kicked off Tunisia, the graduates, and it's at 25%. Jordan, King Abdullah tries to get ahead of the crisis. King Abdullah just sacked his government and appointed a new one with reforms at priority number one. Kings and sacking entire governments. Syria, single-party authoritarian style of government. President Bashar al-Assad. Assad, he took over from his father, and I think his father took over in the late 60s. So the Assads have been in control for over 40 years now, which is never good news, is it really? And they've got a very strong secret police type of, they're very authoritarian, and they should be able to crack down on anybody and everybody. Saudi Arabia, youth unemployment at 42%, but they've got plenty of petrodollars to keep people quiet. Iran, inflation at 13.5%. Iran, 13.5% inflation. Libya, highest unemployment in North Africa. Gaddafi's been there a long time now. Are they sick of him? The Yemen, unemployment rate 40%, and recently described on the World Economic News as a dangerous shithole, which it is. Pakistan, inflation over 15%, basically ungovernable Pakistan. Vietnam, style of government, authoritarian capitalism. Authoritarian's fine if things are going well, but if things stop going well, authoritarian people are normally pushed against very strongly. Venezuela, inflation over 27%. Has Hugo Chavez outstayed his welcome? And the last one is China, again authoritarian. They're doing their best, but it's a huge, huge country to keep under control in an authoritarian manner. That's it for today. See you tomorrow. Bye.